Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world, one book at a time.
We're diving into a book that completely flips the script on evolution, arguing it's not really about the survival of the organism, but about the relentless replication of information.
And it hits you with this idea right out of the gate. We are survival machines, robot vehicles. It's a pretty stark way to look at life, isn't it? It immediately frames us as just temporary hardware, all in service of these things called genes.
Now, that one word in the title, selfish, has sparked decades of confusion and debate. So before we go any further, we have to get clear on what it means and, more importantly, what it doesn't mean. So when Richard Dawkins published The Selfish Gene back in 1976, he created one of the most famous and misunderstood titles in all of science. People immediately thought it was a book arguing that humans are all fundamentally driven by selfish, greedy motives, but that's not the point at all.
So the big question is, if it's not about selfish feelings or morals, what in the world is Dawkins talking about?
Well, he gives a very precise, very technical definition. An act is selfish if it increases the survival chances of the individual doing it. An act is altruistic if it does the opposite. It has nothing to do with intentions or feelings. It's purely about the outcome. It's a biologist term, not a judgment.
Okay, with that cleared up, we can get to the absolute core idea of the book. To really see the world from the gene's point of view, you have to understand the two main players in the story of life.
First, you have the replicator. This is the star of the show. On our planet, that's the gene, a little slice of DNA, and its defining feature, its entire purpose, is to make copies of itself. That's the whole game.
But you know, replicators can't just float around in the ether. They need protection. They need a machine to help them get the copying job done. And that's the vehicle. We are vehicles. So is a bird, an oak tree, a mushroom. We're all just survival machines. And here is the absolute crucial difference between them. The replicators, the genes, are basically immortal. A single gene is just a piece of information, and it can be passed down, copied flawlessly for millions of years. But the vehicles, our bodies, we're temporary. We're disposable machines built by that immortal information.
And that right there gives us the book's single most powerful metaphor. It's a story of immortal instructions building a long succession of disposable machines to house them.
You can see the cycle here perfectly. The replicator, the set of instructions, builds a vehicle. Inside that vehicle, it makes copies of itself. And then when that vehicle inevitably breaks down and dies, it doesn't matter. The replicator has already passed its information into a new generation of vehicles. The information carries on, even as the hardware is left behind.
All right, so if life is driven by these selfish genes just trying to make copies of themselves, that raises a pretty big question. What about altruism? How does this cold, mechanical system explain acts of cooperation and self-sacrifice?
Yeah, this is the classic puzzle, right? If it's all about survival of the fittest, why would any animal ever risk its own life to help another?
The gene's eye view gives us a surprisingly simple answer. See, a particular gene doesn't just exist in one body. It exists as many identical copies across a family of related bodies. So a gene that programs its vehicle to help its sibling or its child is really just helping ensure the survival of its own copies. It's not selfless at all. From the gene's perspective, it's just a smart move.
And this one shift in perspective suddenly makes sense of so many things in nature. The worker bee that dies when it stings an intruder, it's protecting the queen who is a massive factory for its own genes. The parent bird that fakes a broken wing to lure a fox away from its nest, it's saving the vehicles that are carrying half of its genes into the next generation. The behavior looks altruistic, but the underlying genetic calculation is ruthlessly pragmatic.
Now, this idea of the replicator is obviously a game changer for understanding biology. But in the final chapter, Dawkins proposes something truly radical. What if a totally new kind of replicator has appeared on Earth?
And he gave this new replicator a name you might have heard of, the meme. A meme is a unit of culture, an idea, a tune, a fashion that spreads from person to person.
Think about it. Catchy songs, religious ideas, architectural styles, even just a simple way of making a pot. These things aren't passed on through DNA. They replicate by jumping from brain to brain through imitation.
And just like genes compete for survival in the gene pool, memes compete for our attention, for space in our culture. The ideas that are better at getting themselves copied because they're true or useful or just really sticky are the ones that survive and spread. This is a new kind of evolution, and it moves at a blistering speed.
So, after all this, what's the big takeaway? Why does looking at the world this way really matter?
Well, the most important thing to get is that the selfish gene isn't proposing a new theory. All the facts of evolution stay the same. It's a new perspective. It's like one of those optical illusions. Once you shift your focus from the individual organism to the immortal gene, the same picture suddenly reveals a completely different, deeper logic.
And what that shift in perspective does is it allows us to see this fundamental pattern running through all of life and culture, the simple, powerful logic of replication. It shows us how the very same process that builds our bodies also builds our belief systems.
And that leaves us with one last big question. What else might we understand if we start looking for the replicator? For the full long-form deep dive into this book and its ideas, follow the link in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.